Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Wa ba'd. So we left off on verse 93. And verse 93 is actually connected to the previous verse. So verse 92 was talking about, that was not verse 92. Yes, I don't know what happened to the previous verse, but it was talking about murder. So whoever kills a believer except by mistake, right? So no Muslim should ever kill another Muslim. This is pretty obvious, but it was talking about how if somebody kills somebody by mistake, there's going to be a penalty for that. And then we talked about some of the rules regarding that. Okay, so that was verse 92. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, وَمَن يَقْتُلْ مُؤْمِنًا مُتَعَمِّدًا فَجَزَاؤُهُ جَهَنَّمُ خَالِدًا فِيهَا. Whoever kills a believer intentionally, meaning that they don't have any regrets, they will be compensated with hell to stay there forever. But if before I talked about you accidentally kill somebody, there's a penalty for you. Here is the opposite. If you kill somebody, this, killing is such a major sin that this is going to take you on the pathway to the hellfire. وَغَضِبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَلَعْنَهُ وَأَعَدَّ لَهُ عَذَابًا عَظِيمًا. Allah will be displeased with him, condemn him, and will prepare great punishment for him. So this is a very serious sin of murder. Now then Allah talks about fighting in the cause of Allah. Because remember, we talked about killing somebody accidentally, especially in the context of war. You may not identify that this is the right person. It's very dark. There's no night vision. You accidentally kill somebody. There's still a penalty for that. And if you kill them intentionally, then that's a whole nother level. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about some more rules of war and encouraging people to go out and fight. Remember, we're in this context of the city of Medina when the Muslims are being attacked. In the very beginning part, Allah says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ فَتَبَيَّنُوا. Believers, when you go out in the cause of Allah to fight, make sure to clarify, right? Make sure you clarify who you're going to fight. We didn't cover this verse, right? Okay, good. Covered it in my own mind when I was preparing. So, all right. So when you go out to fight, if you're going to be in a battle, in a war, and think about warfare 1400 years ago, there's no electricity, there's no lights, there's no night vision, there's no scopes, on your rifle or something like that. When you go out, make sure you clarify who you're fighting, because you might be fighting the wrong person. You could fight the wrong person by sometimes attacks are done at nighttime. Many times, even today, modern warfare, when they drop bombs and they launch air attacks and air raids, mostly done at nighttime. And then all of a sudden the daytime comes and you wake up and you see the destruction, you see buildings smoking and all of that. So even today, cover of night is a common time where people launch attacks, especially like a surprise attack or something like that. And then there's actually warfare. There's actually warfare that happens as well during the daytime. So you want to make sure who you're fighting. That's one thing. The second thing is, how do you identify who's on your team and who's not on your team? Just like a sports team, you have uniforms, right? So military in a war, they had uniforms. So people would wear a certain thing, but sometimes you have an alliance with another group. So they're going to be wearing a certain type of uniform. Sometimes you have a spy. And if there's a spy who's pretending to be on the other side, all they're going to do is fake the uniform and wear the same uniform that the other person's wearing. And they're going to pretend like they're one of you. How can you tell? You don't have facial recognition. You can't identify each and every single individual person. So it's hard. So Allah is giving a general principle. If you go out to fight, make sure you clarify who you are fighting. وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَنْ أَلْقَى إِلَيْكُمُ السَّلَامَ لَسْتَ مُؤْمِنًا تَبْتَغُونَ عَرْضَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Do not say to those who send greetings of peace to you, those people who say salam to you, right? Because they're trying to show you that they're Muslim. So imagine you're going to go and attack somebody and they're like, Salaam alaikum. They're trying to tell you that they're Muslim. So do not tell them, لست مؤمنا. Don't say, you're not a real believer. You're not a real Muslim. And why would you do that? Just intending to get some worldly benefit. Because sometimes there were some Muslims, and maybe there was a temptation in the mind of some Muslims that they're about to go and fight somebody. And that person, all of a sudden, they say, oh man, Muslim army is here. Looks like they got 100 people. We only have 50 people. Okay, salam alaikum. We're with the Muslims. And they go, we're not going to accept your statement. We're not going to believe you. You're not a true believer just because you say salam alaikum. Does everyone who says salam alaikum, does that mean that they're a true Muslim? No, anyone can fake it. Some people are good at putting an accent on, and some people, they can't say salam properly. Assalamu alaikum, brother. And he might be a real Muslim, genuine Muslim. So you can't just decide that somebody's a Muslim or somebody's not a Muslim by the way that they're all of a sudden saying salam or that they throw out a salam to you. So here it's saying don't reject somebody who says salam alaikum to you in the battlefield, like you're in a state of war. Don't just do that with the intention of maybe he's Muslim, maybe he's not Muslim, but you know what? We're outnumbering this person. And if we defeat this group, guess what we get? We get all their shields, we get all their armor, we get all the money they leave behind. That's a lot of money. Very, very tempting, because that was the way soldiers used to earn their salary, based part of their salary. So it's saying don't do something like that. The rule is this. If somebody says they're Muslim and somebody says assalamu alaikum to you, especially in a state of war, you have to judge them by the outward and believe them and accept that. Even though you may be tempted to say, no, I'm not going to accept the statement. Allah has many benefits, meaning Allah has so many benefits in store for believers who do good. You don't need to think about, what? Well, what if it was an enemy and I can get so much spoils of war from this and that? Whatever Allah is going to give you is more pure and is better for you than whatever you would have gotten from this one. So Allah is saying, trust people and just judge people based on their outward appearance. كَذَلِكَ كُنْتُم مِّن قَبْلُ فَمَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ فَتَبَيَّنُوا. You were also like them before, meaning you are not Muslim. So this is so interesting, by the way. So it's very important to think about this for a moment. Okay, the front row, please. Right here, front row. Front row, hello. Front row, hello. Hello. Assalamu alaikum. Yes, yes. Front row, hello. Assalamu alaikum. During the class, we're not supposed to be talking. Okay, especially if you're in the front row. Being in the front row is the best, mashallah. There can be no talking in the front row. Clear? Agreed? Give me thumbs up if you agree. Thumbs up? Thumbs up? Thumbs up? Yes, good. Alhamdulillah. All right. So it's saying you were like them before. So the Sahaba, the companions, saying you were not Muslim before. How many of the Sahaba were converts to Islam?
All of them.
Every single one of them.
Except Abdullah ibn Zubayr.
MashaAllah. A few of them were part of it. Basically, the majority of all the senior Sahaba, they were all converts. So basically, Allah's talking to the companions and saying, you're judging these people outwardly by saying, you know what? We don't think they're true Muslims. And say, remember that you were not Muslim at some point in your life as well. But then Allah blessed you. How did Allah bless you? He blessed you with Islam. And when you became Muslim, the other Muslims, they took your word and they accepted outwardly that you're Muslim. So imagine if the Muslims did the same thing to the new Muslims. So when Khalid ibn al-Walid became Muslim, imagine if Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali and all the early believers, they say, you know what? Khalid, we're not going to accept you. You're just saying you're a believer. Get out of here. We don't want to have anything to do with you. So Khalid ibn al-Walid now, at this time, right? He's actually, no, not at this time. He came later. But let's say Umar ibn Khattab. He came to Islam later. If Abu Bakr and Ali and the early Muslims, Uthman, if they didn't accept him, they could have said, you know what? We don't accept what you're saying. Outwardly, all of a sudden, you've just decided to change. We're not going to accept you. That could have happened. So Allah is saying to people like Umar, the same way that the early Muslims accepted your outward confession of faith, you should accept these people's outward confession of faith because you were in the exact same position that they were in before. So you need to give them the benefit of the doubt and just take them at their word that they are sincere converts to Islam. But tabayyan, again, Allah says, so make sure you clarify. Be careful who you're about to fight. Because if they've truly accepted Islam, they're your ally. Even though they may look like they're one of your enemies, because normally alliances are made and you say, this person has declared war on you. You don't know, all of a sudden, 1 week ago, they accepted Islam. The news didn't reach you. You didn't get the memo. By the way, the alliance has changed. Of course it's changed. If you become Muslim, your alliance has changed. So Allah talked about killing a Muslim by mistake before this. And now he's talking about make sure that the people you're fighting are actually your real enemies. And if somebody says salam to you, take their outward, their word. And this is a very important principle for Muslims, by the way. If somebody comes and tells you genuinely, you know what, I'm really sorry for what I did, and they seem some level of genuineness in them. You can't be like, I don't accept you, I don't believe you. You can't do that. If somebody comes and says, you know what, say something very simple. Somebody comes and says, hey, you want to pray Maghrib? Say, yeah, I already prayed Maghrib. I don't believe you. I don't think you pray. You have to judge people by the outward things of what they're saying. Because you can never know what's inside the hearts of people, especially if they're saying that they're Muslim. So Allah is giving a stern warning and a lesson here. Says, you know what? If you've ever been in that situation before where somebody judged you, your intention, and you're like, but I'm telling you, that's not my intention. You should understand now, you should be more sympathetic for somebody who's in a similar position because you were in that position before. The beautiful way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clarifies this. Allah is aware of what you do. So He knows if you're going to make the decision to keep on fighting just to get some money, or you're going to follow the rules that Allah is giving you. لا يستوي القاعدون من المؤمنين غير أولي الضرر والمجاهدون في سبيل الله بأموالهم وأنفسهم. The believers who stay at home. Staying at home, this is in the context of war. So they were supposed to go out and fight, but it was not a requirement at this time. So the believers who stay at home, instead of going out and fighting and joining the war, except those who are disabled. Disabled due to some illness, they're so sick they cannot fight. Not they have a little cough or something like that, but they're going to be of no benefit on the battlefield. Or they have some other excuse, like old people who are very old or injured, or children or something like that. They don't need to go out and fight. But the ones who stay at home are not equal in virtue to those who strive in the cause of Allah with their wealth and with their lives. The people who go out and join the war, they're spending their wealth as well, because it costs money to buy swords, costs money to buy a shield, costs money to have a horse, costs money to get armor. It costs money to leave supplies for your family, and then you go out and all of these things. So they're spending their wealth, and they're putting their lives on the line because they could be attacked, and they might actually get killed. So Allah is saying that the people who stayed at home, even if even though it's not required for them to go out, but if you go out and you are willing to sacrifice for Allah, of course you're going to gain way more reward than the people who stay behind. فضل الله المجاهدين بأموالهم وأنفسهم على القاعدين درجة. Allah has elevated in rank those who strive with their wealth and their lives above those who stay behind. And it's talking about the people who don't have a valid excuse and stay behind. Now, I checked some books of tafsir. They kind of made a mistake here. They said those who stay behind with a valid excuse. That's actually a weak opinion, because there are many hadith, many statements. By the way, what's the definition of hadith? You can tell me, what is the definition besides Jabir of a hadith? Yes.
Story.
A what? A story? No, more specific. Hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah. Sayings of the Prophet, or of what to do. Okay, so that's still a saying. There's two more parts of the category. Yeah. What the Prophet did. So something the Prophet said, something the Prophet did, or what's number 3? Yes. All the way in the back. Yeah, go on.
Like how the prophet, like
Kind of close. I'm going to have your brother help you out. Go ahead, Jabir.
It's something recommended to you.
No, not something. Because if he recommended something to do, that's him speaking. There's one more category. It's very important to know this. Yes, Ali. Somebody what? Somebody else should what? Yes. Oh, somebody else reported that the Prophet did? But that's an action. You're close. Yeah. Okay, so that's some scholars mentioned that, but for me, that counts as an action where the Prophet didn't stop it. So he basically did an action that didn't stop it. Still in the category of action. One more category, Narration? No, not it. Yeah.
Someone did something and the Prophet, peace be upon him, confirmed it.
No, that's the same thing she said. So if he confirmed his action, how did he confirm his action? Either with a statement or with an action.
Just like the
It's unnecessary category. This is the problem with Aristotle and the categorization of things, right? The thing is, you should minimize the amount of categories in definitions. I'll teach this some other day in detail. One more category, yes. No, not hadith Qudsi. One more thing. Wish my kids were here. They would love this. A description of the Prophet ﷺ. So a hadith is one of three things. I want you guys all to memorize this. Okay? A hadith is either something the Prophet said, something he did, or a description of him. Simple. You got it? So if somebody said, hey, the Prophet ﷺ, he wore a white shirt. That's a hadith. If the Prophet ﷺ ate chicken, it's a hadith. It's a Sahih Bukhari. It's authentic hadith. He ate chicken. That's the whole hadith. I saw the Prophet eating chicken. Right? Or he said something. So these are three categories of what a hadith is. Okay? How in the world did we get on this topic? Cannot remember anymore. But oh yeah. So tafsir. So the tafsir about this is mistaken. So it's talking about those who have a valid excuse. If somebody is sick, genuinely sick, and they cannot go out in battle, and they're sitting in bed and they're lying in bed, is this verse saying that the people who went out to fight are elevated in rank compared to ones who had a valid excuse and they're lying at home and they really wanted to go, but they will not get the same amount of reward? It's not talking about them. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ, he says in a hadith, there's many hadiths about this, so if somebody has a genuine excuse and they wanted to go and perform a good action, they will get the same type of reward as the person who did that action, even though they were unable to do it because they had a valid excuse. Like, for example, when you're fasting in Ramadan and all of a sudden you get really, really sick. I really wanted to fast that day in Ramadan. Do you think a verse like this would be like, you know what? The people who fasted in Ramadan, they have a much higher level than the people who got sick in Ramadan and they did not get as much reward. Can you imagine that? No, that's not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say. And that's the Prophet would not say that. So this is not what's talking about. So be careful if you read other books of tafsir. Here, it's talking about the people who stayed behind without a valid excuse because fighting was not a requirement at this time. So basically, this is an encouragement for people to go out and do something more virtuous. وَكُلًّا وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الْحُسْنَى. Allah has promised each group a nice reward because fighting was not a requirement. So each of them are virtuous, but one is more virtuous than the other because they're doing more and they're putting their lives on the line. Allah will give those who strive by fighting a far better reward than the ones who stay behind. So I've explained this before. The word mujahideen comes from the word jihad. And jihad has two meanings. It has a linguistic meaning, which means to strive or to struggle. And in the context of warfare, it means people who go out and fight in a war and they put their lives in danger for a just war or for actually, stopping oppression or injustice or something like that. So that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about here. دَرَجَاتٍ مِّنْهُ وَمَغْفِرَةً وَرَحْمَةً. They will have higher ranks, forgiveness and mercy from Him. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. Allah is forgiving and Allah is merciful. All right, so this is the first section. We ended here. We finished the section. We'll start the next section. Section 14, verse 97. إن الذين توفاهم الملائكة ظالمي أنفسهم قالوا فيما كنتم. When the angels take away, and the word tawaffa means to pass away. Tawaffa, when it's talking about the angels, it's talking about the angels of death, or the angel of death and his helpers. When they come and they take away people's souls, and basically they're dying, so the angels take away in death those people who wrong themselves. And the people who wrong themselves mean, this is one way of Allah saying you've done some bad things. And when you say you've done some bad things, you haven't wronged Allah. You've wronged yourself by not doing what you should have been doing. So there's a context here. If you don't read tafsir, if you don't read the explanation, you'll never figure out what this verse is saying. That those who wrong themselves, they're going to say what's wrong. The angels are going to say what's wrong with you. So you have to know the history of what actually happened. So what happened was, there was a group of Muslims. Remember, this is in Medina right now. Okay? What surah are we on? Somebody tell me what surah we're on? What surah are we on? Surah An-Nisa. Who can tell me the translation? Nisa. Yes. Women. Good. All right. And what number is this chapter in the Quran? Yes. What number is it? 4. Good. All right. So this is a surah that was revealed in the time of Medina when the Muslims already migrated to Medina. And what happened was the Prophet, peace be upon him, told the Muslims who are all in Mecca before and other places, the ones who are in Mecca, said, you all need to migrate to Medina because Mecca is not safe for you. You can't practice Islam properly over there. And you might be pressured by the Quraysh to do something that's going to undermine the Muslims. So you should not be living in Mecca anymore. Everyone needs to migrate. But there were some people say, but Mecca is so nice. And it's so comfortable here. And I have my business here. And I have my family here. And I was born and raised here. And I love my city. And I don't want to leave my city. So this is a problem. So these people were wronging themselves by not doing what the Prophet told them to do. And now it's talking about them. And it's saying when the angels come and they take away the lives of those Muslims who remained in Mecca, who refused to migrate, the angels are going to tell them when they're dying, what's wrong with you people? Right? Why couldn't you practice Islam fully? And why couldn't you migrate out of Mecca? Why did you stay here in Mecca and not migrate to Medina like the Prophet told you to do? They will respond with their excuse, say we were in a position of weakness in the land. We were weak, we were stuck. Nothing we could do, we couldn't get out of Mecca. It's too hard to get to Medina for us. قالوا ألم تكن أرض الله واسعة فتهاجروا فيها. They will respond, the angels are going to respond back to them. Wasn't the land of Allah spacious enough for you to move away? Like, couldn't you have gone to some other land where you can actually practice Islam properly and fully? You didn't have to be stuck in a place like Mecca. Mecca at that time was controlled by the idol worshippers. The Meccans were Quraysh who didn't accept Islam. They worshipped idols and they were constantly oppressing and persecuting Muslims. So you'd think, well, why in the world would any Muslim want to stay in a place like that? But there's 2 levels of Muslims. There's the Muslims who are low level and they're being oppressed. And then there's the Muslims who are kind of wealthy and they have businesses and they have connections and everything. And they're kind of keeping their Islam a little bit secret. They say, you know what? What's your name? So he said, my name's Ali. Call me Al, Yeah. You don't even know the difference. You just make up some name. You pretend like you're not Muslim at all. So there were a lot of people like that, a few people like that in Mecca. And Allah is calling them out and saying, you know what? You weren't even able to practice Islam properly. This was wrong. You should have done what the Prophet, peace be upon him, told you to do. فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَأْوَاهُمْ جَهَنَّمْ. It is they who will have hell as their home. وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. What a horrible destination. Right? So this is a really strong criticism. The people who did not want to migrate to Medina. And these are Muslims. The people who are Muslims. And Allah is saying, you didn't migrate, and this is what happened. The angels are going to talk to you after death. And hell is going to be your abode. It's a very, very serious and stern warning. So this brings up a question that a lot of Muslims talk about. Talk about hijrah, talk about migration. Do we need to migrate and leave the land of the kuffar, the land of the disbelievers, and go to a Muslim land where we can practice Islam more freely or better or something like that? So this is not a new issue. Let me just ask real quick. How many of you have ever had a conversation with someone who was talking about, hey, let's get out of America and let's move to a Muslim country or a Muslim land because we're in the land of disbelief? So anyone had the conversation like this?
Yeah.
Okay, so more than half the people have had a conversation like this before, right? So this is it's a hot topic. And this is being directly addressed in these verses, right? So first of all, it's criticizing the people who are not, they're criticizing the people who didn't migrate. And the reason why they were supposed to migrate is because they weren't able to practice Islam properly. Well, one, the Prophet told them to migrate, and they didn't follow. Number two, what's the underlying reason? Why did the Prophet tell them to migrate? Because number one, they are not able to practice Islam fully. And number two, they're not able to be part of the greater Muslim Ummah to give strength to the Muslim community in Medina. And number three, they might have to make compromises in their religion and maybe support the enemies of Islam because they're remaining behind in Mecca. A similar question today. Some people say, well, with what's happening, America's foreign policy when it comes to Palestine, we're paying taxes. Why are we doing this? We should get out of this land. We should migrate. So the automatic assumption or the automatic response is, let's migrate to a Muslim country. What is a Muslim country? It's a very important question. As a Muslim country, who can tell me what is a Muslim country? Define it for me. Yasmin, what's a Muslim country?
But like overall, the culture, the language, like most everything has like you could tell.
You can just tell it's Muslim because of the culture and the language. Okay, all right. Say it in the back. What's a Muslim country? The what? The population is what? Meaning they're Muslim. Okay. So let's say the assumption of most people is if the majority population of that country is Muslim, we call it a Muslim country, right? So does that make it an Islamic country? There's a difference between a Muslim country and an Islamic country, right? If you're in a Muslim country, does it mean that you can practice Islam more than you can in a non-Muslim country? Let me give you some examples. Turkey is what percentage Muslim? 99%. And 20 years ago, hijab was banned in Turkey. The president's daughter had to attend school in the United States so that she could wear her hijab because the president's daughter couldn't go to university wearing hijab. At this 20 years ago, by the way, it's gotten better. But that's a 99% Muslim country 20 years ago. So does a Muslim country mean Islamic country?
No.
20 years ago, Tunisia. What's the Muslim population? I don't know. It's for sure it's majority, like 60%, 70%, 80%, something like that. Tunisia. Hijab was banned. You cannot wear hijab in school. So Muslim majority country doesn't always mean Islamic country. Okay. If you talk about today, the political climate, you say not supporting the Palestinian people, supporting alliance with Israel. Let's take a Muslim country. I don't want to pick on countries, but let's just, all due respect, let's pick Egypt. What's the official stance, the Egyptian government, on cooperation with Israel and what their attitude is towards the Palestinians? How much different is it compared to American foreign policy? Let's take Saudi Arabia, where Makkah and Medina are. How much different is it, their attitude towards the situation of what's happening in Gaza right now, compared to the United States. Maybe somewhat little bit different, but we're talking about it's not such a simple discussion of saying, you know what, we need to get out of the non-Muslim country and go to the Muslim country. But then on the flip side, people ask this question all the time. Say, what about your kids? You know, you're going to raise your kids in this, like let's say in California, it's getting really bad and people are teaching weird values and transhumanism and transgenderism and all sorts of things that are happening. You say, you know, there's such a bad influence over here. We move to a Muslim majority country, at least like Yasmin said, at least there's like culture, Muslim culture, and people are praying, there's more masjids, and there's like a sense of maybe discipline for kids or something like that. So there's an argument that can be made. But what I want to tell you is it's not so simplistic to simply say, oh, look, the verse in the Quran was criticizing these people. They were living in a non-Muslim city and they need to move to the Muslim city. It's not just a non-Muslim city to a Muslim city. It's much more nuanced and much more detailed than that. So if you're more interested in this topic, I have a pretty short paper. It's only like 10 pages. It's called, it's about migration. Do Muslims have to migrate out of a Muslim majority or non-Muslim majority country? And this situation happened in the past many times. So for example, can anybody name a country where the Muslims were the majority and then the Muslims didn't become a majority anymore? I'm saying Spain, perfect example. So what happened was, as soon as it flipped, and now the Christians, the Inquisition happened, and the conquistadores and everything, they came in and they took over Spain. The Muslims were still living there as a minority. And while they were living there as a minority, the Muslims in Morocco, because Spain is next to Morocco, the Muslims in Morocco, they quoted this verse. And they said, you have to migrate to Morocco because now you're living in a non-Muslim land. Look at the verse in the Quran. And the Muslims didn't want to migrate because they said, you know what? Yeah, it's really bad. These people who took over the land and everything, but they were wealthy people who had some connection, so they wanted to remain there. So some people wanted to remain there because they had their business and they had this connection and all of these things. So there's a whole range of literature, of books written about, articles written about, do Muslims need to leave Spain or are they allowed to stay there? Is it haram for them to stay in Spain? Or are they allowed to still stay there if they can pray their prayers and stuff like that? That's what my paper is about. There's a second place where this happened. It was in the eastern part of Turkey. It's called Mardin. So there's a fatwa by Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah. It's called the Fatwa of Mardin, where basically, the Muslim scholars had said, this is Darul Islam and this is Darul Kufr. This is the land of Islam and this is the land of disbelief. So Imam Ibn Taymiyyah is one of the great scholars. He came across a city like Mardin and he saw something weird was going on there. He says, like, they're non-Muslims, but then there's like Muslims there. And he's like, what is this? But he made up a new term. He says, this is known as a hybrid dar. It's dar murakkab. It is a hybrid between Islam and Kufr. And we need to have a separate ruling for that. So that's why, anyways, those of you who ever have a discussion or have this long conversation about should we leave America? Should we stay in America? Can we practice Islam better if we move to country X? Or can we practice Islam better if we stay in the United States? These Muslims have these conversations all the time. Before you start, quoting verses, or before you start having a strong opinion, realize that you're not the first person who's ever had this discussion. Thousands and thousands of Muslims for over 1,000 years have had the same discussion. It's nice to read a little bit before you have a very strong opinion on such an issue. Anyway, let's cover the last verse and then we'll stop. إِلَّا الْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْوِلْدَانِ لَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ حِيلَةً وَلَا يَهْتَدُونَ سَبِيلًا. Except men, women, and children who are in a state of true weakness, who cannot find a strategy or a way to get out. We're talking about migration away from Mecca. There were some people in Mecca, they could not leave. They had no way. Like, there weren't passports and green cards and all that stuff, but they had no way of getting to Medina or leaving Mecca. They were stuck there and there was no other option for them. So Allah is saying, the previous verse that was scolding those people for staying in Mecca, These are the exceptions to the rule. So this is one category of exceptions to the rule. So Allah's not He's not putting everybody in the same category. You have to look at everybody's circumstance and everybody's situation independent. All right, we'll stop there. And we have like 2 weeks of Kahoot to make up. So let's load it, inshallah, in the meantime.
Related.
Yeah, block.
Okay, we'll connect the last verse. All right. While they're loading it, inshallah. فَأُولَٰئِكَ عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَعْفُوَ عَنْهُمْ. Those are the ones Allah might forgive because they had a valid excuse. Allah might forgive them. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَفُوًّا غَفُورًا. Allah is overlooking. Allah is forgiving. It is connected. Okay. Questions? Hold on. Your sister had her hand up, I think, before, or at least she spoke before. Either way, can women fight? Yeah, I'm sure women can fight. I've seen a lot of women fight. You mean like, oh, can women? I know what you mean. Like, can women participate in a war? I mean, if there's a need for them to. The question whether they're required to? No, they're not required to. Like men, right? They're not required to go for Jummah prayer. They're not required to support their entire family financially. So there's an ease on women, even when it comes to warfare and finances and things like that. But if they can fight, if they're needed to fight, then yeah, absolutely. There's nothing that stops them from fighting per se. Jabir.
Get more edges. What if you have to?
Oh, Allah is re-emphasizing the people who strive because He's trying to encourage them to go out because it's not required. Yes, Allah might forgive them. It's a good question. So I wanted to dwell on that a little bit. But the reason why it says might is people should not be so overconfident that, you know what? Automatically Allah's going to accept everybody's excuse. So it kind of reminds people that says it means like Allah will probably forgive them, but that's out of His mercy. And you should accept that rather than saying, I'm entitled to forgiveness because I had a valid excuse. You should always kind of this is for the people who are being addressed directly. You should always remember that it's out of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He's going to forgive.